Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the summit. I hope everyone is doing great. I want you to meet someone very special today. His name is Alex Fraysse. Before finding out his true calling, Alex was deep in the corporate finance world. For almost a decade, he's been tuning his strategic talents into life changing guidance for entrepreneurs and C suite executives. His straightforward yet powerful methods have helped thousands to simplify their lives, find their purpose, and achieve their goals. Alex is also an ADHD and performance coach. He's got an impressive background with studies in nutrition, herbal medicine, flow and performance coaching, and he's currently diving into epigenetics. We have also been working on an incredible project together that leverages Alex's unmatched expertise in ADHD nutrition. Welcome aboard, Alex. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me, Spider. That is a very, very kind introduction. I appreciate that.
Totally deserved. So let's start off with stress and anxiety, as
Yep.
this really impact kids with ADHD on a daily basis, really.
Yep.
What are some early signs that parents should watch for to tell that it's really stress, not just ADHD?
So that's a really great question. That's a fantastic one to kind of start with because stress is very prevalent in today's world, and especially with kids, and especially in kids with ADHD, and it does make your symptoms, let's say, worse. So if we're looking at sort of basic stress symptoms, the first ones that I'd be looking at are kind of like my go-to ones. You know what I mean? So we're looking at things like erratic behavior, like your behavior suddenly just changed. Instead of giving like say a regular request or like a regular answer to a request, someone's like, "Can you pass me that?" It's like, "Yes." It's like, "Fine." Suddenly it's more of a grumpy response, or if it's a huffing and puffing. "Oh no, I don't really want to," and you're like, "Well, where did this come from?" So like those kind of behavior changes. Is definitely one to notice. Like you're just feeling a bit more introverted. You're not feeling as sociable. You're a bit more quick to anger. It could be just be really quickly or just more suddenly out of the blue. You kind of erupt. Those are signs of stress. We're also looking at, let's say, on a physiological level, increased sweating, whether it's off the hands, the armpits, the body. Also increased body odor. So you may suddenly just find your kid start being a bit smelly, more than usual for children especially. And also something that's also really kind of key is they get a bit more hot more quickly, or they flush, get a kind of like red flush more easily, which ties into the sweating as well. You can also look at stomach issues, so potentially needing the loo a bit more, whether that's to do a number one or a number two. You can also look at bowel motions in terms of their consistency. So if they go a bit more loose, then you're definitely looking at stress. Certain kids, depending, also applies to adults, like certain kids either go more constipated or they go with more diarrhea. So looking at a change in bowel motions can also really be a big sign of something's not quite right. And something that ties into that is also your appetite change. Some people stress eat, they eat more. Some people eat less, I'm not hungry anymore, or no, I can't eat. And suddenly you're thinking, oh, but you're used to eating that. What's changed? And it literally just could be that just feeling a bit more stressed. And then, which a second part which ties into that is craving a bit more salty foods or sweet foods. That's showing that your adrenals are sort of craving a bit more nourishment and a bit more grounding and stability. So you're going for snacky food. So that's when you need to be a bit more careful. Don't give them, let's say, sugary chocolate. You can potentially get a dark chocolate or a piece of fruit or something like that instead.
Wow, that's incredible. You mentioned anxiety as well. When kids are anxious, they often cannot focus or get stuff done, right?
Yeah.
They seem to know what would make them feel better, but they just can't move past that task paralysis. What would be your best tip for breaking through this?
So I definitely have a few options which I like to use, and it's one of them is what I call gamification. So making things into a game. Kids love games, so if you sort of treat it as a video game, then it makes it much more easy. And generally speaking, if you get task paralysis, it's because you're so overwhelmed, you don't really know where to start. Like, oh, I have all this work to do. Where do I start? I've got this big homework. It's a big project. Where do I start? I don't know. And you start freaking out. So instead, what I like to do is, especially actually with my little brother, my little sister, and I could have 5 years old. And I'm like, I just break it down into step by step by step by step. And it's very much a case of treating it like a video game. And every time they accomplish, let's say, level one, you get a treat. It could be an immediate treat, or it could be a treat once you finish the task. So kind of you accumulate it in that way. And then the trick is this also helps to make it fun and engaging, especially if it's a really boring piece of homework or boring task, which creates a task paralysis. You want to make it fun. You want to make it engaging. You want to be like, you know what? We can make boring things fun, and then it enables them to also to gain a whole new level of skills, which they can use in the future as well. And what I like to tie this in with is actually about three other things, to be honest. So gamification is like step one. The other step is body doubling. So either you are sitting next to them and you're either helping them with their work, getting into the flow of it, and then once they're in the flow, you can kind of lead the room and lead them to it. Once you're in that hyper focused flow, like it doesn't matter, you're there and you stay there. Or the other option is if you have your own work to do, you do it next to them and you just show them this is how it's done. Kind of a saying a friend of mine and I, we used to say to each other, is that monkey see, monkey do. So if they see big monkey doing their work, little monkey's gonna be like, cool, let me do that. And then it makes it a little easier for them to tie into it. And if you really want some aspects of creating a bit of a competition, can make it also adding to the gamification a bit more fun. Whoever finishes first gets a prize. And then that way it's like, ooh, okay, now there's something to actually look forward to. It kind of engages that dopamine sense of there is actually a physical reward. What I will say is, if you're naturally competitive, you shouldn't always let the children win, because it's a good life lesson, and also will make them more hungry to win next time. So when they're in task paralysis and they're next to you, they're like, all right, it's game time, and they're like, oh, okay, it helps to shift in their mind, like, okay, let's get on and let's do this, which I find quite fun to do, and I've had a lot of fun doing it with my little brother and my little sister, to be honest. It's creating quite a good bond with us. And then the two other aspects are music and breath work. So music is a fantastic tool and it's mostly free, especially if you just have Spotify or YouTube or whatever. You play certain frequencies of music which then engage a prefrontal cortex, which is your executive function area of the brain. So, music that's kind of been shown to have these effects are classical music, ambient, sort of house, techno, trance music, and instrumental music. Essentially music without words, so you don't get lost. And you just put it on in the background so you can still hear it, so you're actively listening to it, but it then turns off that aspect of freaking out, because the music will regulate your nervous system. It gets you from sympathetic, which is I call it your stress and fight or flight, and then it gets you into parasympathetic, which I call your rest and relax. And that's where you can get into flow states much more quickly, especially as children and especially as adults. And then if you combine that with a bit of breath work as well, so just simple breath work with a child, it can just be a bit of box breathing, a bit of pranayama, something just to slow you down, get them present, because when you're in task paralysis, you're stuck in your mind. You're what I call top heavy, and you need to be back down into the body, a bit more grounded, so the breath work disengages that sympathetic activity into parasympathetic activity. So if you play the music, so what I do is you play the music and you do the breath work together, so you're kind of stacking them. And then when the kid is ready, you're like, cool, now the game begins. Now we can do our task, and then that's where you can sit next to them. So that I find that really useful.
Brilliant approaches. Absolutely amazing. Let's stick to the stress and anxiety. You believe in a holistic approach, right, to manage stress and anxiety naturally.
Yeah, very much.
What advice would you give to the parents to help their kids using purely natural methods?
So there's an array of things you can do. There are what I call your free methods. So, there's your breath work, there's your meditation, there's your grounding, connecting to nature, making sure, especially, it's easy obviously in the summer and the springtime when it's a bit warmer. I understand in autumn and in winter it's a bit more difficult, but getting some feet, hands on the ground or on a tree, it helps to connect you to nature. It helps to reset not only your circadian rhythm, which is your sleep pattern, it helps to reset your nervous system. And there's plenty of studies showing that connection to nature really helps us. And one of my favorite studies was done in Japan with people, and it was not to do with children, but it was to do with these people who were essentially diagnosed with mild depression, and the doctors prescribed them a dose of nature. And within, I think it was 2 weeks or 2 months, they all came back and basically didn't need medication because they were basically, their nervous system reset. So that's something that is great for stress and anxiety. It also makes you more present to what is. So then you can be like, hi, we're in nature. Let's make this more of a game. Can you hear the birds? Can you see the trees? Can you see the flowers? And it gets you more present to what is and more connected within yourself. So that is like a massive reset. And whilst you're in nature, you can do a bit of breathwork and a bit of meditation. And for children, and I'm not saying meditate for half an hour, become like, that's not going to happen. A kid's attention span, you got 5 to 15 minutes max, right? So you give them 5 to 10 minutes worth of doing that, and then it helps to reset their system. And if we're going to talk about things that actually, before we get onto that, there's also exercise. Exercise is great just to get out the stress, the built up stress in the body, because the kid is going to be like, there's so much energy. I kind of see them as like, I use this analogy the other day, like they are a full Duracell battery. Us adults, our battery has been reduced, so we don't need as much work, but their battery is full. So they need to do a lot of running around, using their minds, using their bodies, like tiring their system out. So then when it comes to nighttime, they can actually like chill and get the stress out. That's really important. And if we're going to look at, supplements and herbs to take, if we look at herbs, I love using things like lemon balm, passion flower, tulsi, skullcap, chamomile, lavender. Like all of them are really wonderful, what we call nervines, which are herbs which have an effect upon the nervous system, and they help to calm you down, help to tone the nervous system, and they're very, very safe to use with children. Depending on your age, you use a slightly different dose. But that we can really get into on another call, because I can talk about that for hours.
Well, I just been needing to ask you that given that food is really crucial for mental and physical health, how
Yeah.
can we really optimize the nutrition for kids with ADHD to boost focus or emotional regulation?
I mean, with food, food's great. Food is one of the most key components of helping to regulate nervous system, because it keeps you fed, it gives you the right energies. And if you are someone with ADHD, you need specific foods. You are looking at foods which are rich in tyrosine, foods are rich in choline, which for me is why every child should be eating meat and eggs. And it's been shown over multiple studies that actually being on a vegan diet for a child's development is actually not very healthy. So you want to be eating these foods which are rich in tyrosine. So you're looking at meat, pork, chicken, salmon. You're looking at eggs, lentils, chickpeas, maybe tofu once in a while, but I wouldn't be leaning on that too heavily. That's going to help provide the right precursor to turn that into dopamine. And you want to add, and when you add in the vegetables alongside the protein, you'll be getting the right, what I call cofactors, things which are going to help convert the tyrosine and the choline into acetylcholine, and from tyrosine into dopamine to nourish the brain and therefore the body. And then what I teach with my personal clients is also how to use herbs and spices alongside it, because that not only helps with taste, it helps with flavor, it also helps on a physical level. So I just use some quick ones as an example. You have rosemary, which is great for the brain function, and it's also great for digestion and for your liver. Thyme is great for digestion. It also helps with your mood. You got turmeric and ginger, which are great for your gut health, and they're also great for inflammation. So all these things add flavor, that add taste, but also they have secondary effects, primary and secondary effects upon the body as well, which is absolutely key. And all of these things also ensure proper bowel motions. Like you want to be making sure you're having good bowel motions, because that has a massive effect upon your gut health. And gut health is key to having a more stable mood, more emotionally regulated. It makes an absolutely massive difference.
Awesome. So I hear you. Food, nutrition, spices are super important in this sense.
Yeah.
But what about ADHD kids who struggle with eating or have extreme sensory issues like visual discomfort or texture aversion? How can parents help without just seeing those kids as picky eaters?
So I think the most important thing is to have acceptance that your child is going to go through this. I'm talking to the parents, like this is about you. This, like, you have to accept that your child is going to be going through these phases. I know adults as ADHD who go through these phases still. Just certain textures, suddenly you just go off of them, and it's very much just accept. Okay, this is a phase. We're going to find a workaround. One day it's like they could love mashed potatoes, and they're like, nope, this is now horrific. You can still feed them potatoes in another form. You can roast them, you can steam them, you can boil them. You can think of different ways to do it. It's the same thing, let's say, with broccoli. You can find different ways to cook it. You can mash it, you can steam it, you can roast it. It provides different textures and still provides you with the right nutrition. So that's a massive part of it. So, and I like to say, if you can create a co-creation dynamic with your child, like you build it up with them and you're very inquisitive and you ask them questions, oh, what do you feel like, it creates that sense of, oh, okay, I'm allowed to kind of share my opinion. I'm not just going to be force-fed. And what I would say to parents is, if you were in their position, how would you want to be treated? Would you just want to be given the food and be like, eat it? Oh, you're not eating it, you're fussy. No, you wouldn't, that's horrific. Like, we all dealt with that, especially ADHD kids, and it's not very fun. So what I'd say is, why would you want to perpetuate that upon your own children? So when you kind of co-create something and you find meals that work, your kid will eat those meals day after day after day after day. So it also simplifies your life as an adult for cooking, because you know what your child is going to like, and you can cook that for a certain amount of time, which takes a lot of pressure off. Oh, what am I going to cook for my kid? Because you've created that time with them to create those menus. And there will be a time when suddenly they're like, this doesn't give me dopamine anymore. I need a new set of recipes. And then you begin the cycle again of just, we spend a day, we spend a day and afternoon together, and you start figuring out, okay, what do you like eating? And then cool, we've got a set for the next couple of weeks, couple of months. So then you kind of keep on working, and that's great for the dopamine cycle as well, to be honest. And then the one thing I'd say is, be encouraging when you see them wanting to try something new. Don't be like, oh wow, you want to try something new. It's like, oh no, this is great, amazing. Like, encourage them, give them that self-belief, because they're still figuring out who they are. I mean, adults still are, but you're giving them that permission to feel supported and feel loved in those moments, as opposed to sort of that passive aggressive positivity, which doesn't really do any justice to anyone.
True. Okay. If parents get their kids into the habit of, I don't know, you mentioned passion flower tea or chamomile or, at night, how can they make sure that kids don't start making sure like that they're going to start overusing it or relying on it too much, like many of us maybe do with coffee or energy drinks or whatever.
Yeah, very much. I mean, thankfully, children on coffee should never ever happen, and we'll be safe from that for a long time. What I would say is that herbs are thankfully not addictive, so that is, in a way, it's completely safe to use them. And what I would say is to actually potentially use a variety of herbs. So let's say one day it's chamomile, the next day it's tulsi, the next day it's passion flower. So you kind of change it up a little bit, so they're not becoming reliant on it. Another option is to have like a herb for the daytime, then a herb for the nighttime. So kind of keeping it different, you're kind of changing it up, and you're kind of still giving them dopamine, and you're still helping them to relax and do the things. And then the most important thing I'd say is use it only when your kid needs it. Don't give it to them willy-nilly, as we say in English. Like, don't give it to them just for the sake of giving it to them. Make sure like they actually need it. If they're already tired, they're already fatigued, there's no need for the tea. They're ready to go to bed. They're ready to nap. They're ready to chill. There's no need to give them something. But if they're still very active and still very hyper, then yes, absolutely give them the tea then. Like, I'm a big fan of use things when you need them. When you don't need them anymore.
Yeah, that's great advice.
And something you can do, sorry, just to quickly jump in before, sorry, the question is, if you're worried about having to overuse, let's say, teas and stuff for getting to bed, something that can work instead is grounding sheets, earthing sheets, which have either got silver or copper in them, which help to decharge your body of all the electrons and basically helps you to remain very calm. So that's another option. And I have them on my bed, and especially in a world where everything is, especially in a city where everything's filled with electricity and you're always being bombarded, that type of thing really helps to just calm you down and get you into a space for sleeping more easily.
All right, writing that one down. As I was mentioning coffee just before, for us, for adults, of course, it made me think of your super interesting take on how epigenetics influences coffee consumption. Can you tell us more about it, please?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. There are a range of genes which affect your ability to drink caffeine. There are certain genes which allow you to upregulate or downregulate coffee, which means there are certain people who can have coffee throughout the day and go to bed at night, no issues. I know people who can have a cup of coffee and fall asleep immediately. They have what you call the most optimal genetics for caffeine metabolization. I personally do not. If I have coffee past midday, I'm awake till 1, 2, 3 in the morning, because I have a slow metabolization of caffeine in my system. So it's a bit of a nightmare. So if I have coffee, I have it then. And then there's the aspects of, does coffee give you jitters or anxiety? There's also those genetics as well. So if you're someone who is prone to getting a bit of jitters or anxiety after coffee, that for me is a sign that it's not meant for you, and that is okay. You can use other things like you have a mate, green tea. There are other options as well. So that's definitely something to take into account. And then something which is also important is the state of your nervous system anyways. So you may have the right genes, but if you're already close to burnout, those genes don't kind of really matter because your body's like, oh, I can't handle this. That's either going to turn you into shutdown or it's going to turn you into overdrive and overheating and burning out very, very quickly. So the state of your nervous system health plays a massive role as well as your genetics.
That's super interesting. Considering your background in the corporate world and now training entrepreneurs, what are some effective frameworks from there that we could also use for ADHD? For example, what's one ADHD routine from office life that works well?
Very good question. For me, it's going to vary person to person because I work with people. So everyone's routine is going to look slightly different, but I would say having a morning routine and an evening routine is paramount to having essentially a successful day. It kind of sets you up for the start and it sets you up for the end. If you have those two things down, you're going to nail your kind of the rest of your day. Because you start the day off right, you're not, let's say, I always say to people, don't use your phones for at least an hour, 45 minutes, first thing in the morning. Just have a slow 45 minutes, hour, get out of bed, brush your teeth, maybe do a bit of stretching, go for a walk. If you have if a dog or a cat, feed them, go for a walk. And then you can go on your phone. That way you're not going to be burning up your dopamine very, very early on. And therefore you're just going to be constantly seeking. And you end up pretty much burnt out by like 2 o'clock in the afternoon and you've got nothing left. And you're then relying on caffeine and donuts and biscuits in the office to carry on going, which is a nightmare. But one other thing I would say is if you can plan your day the evening before, or it ties into also planning your whole week. So what I'd like to say is you plan your whole week on a Sunday. I usually do it Sunday morning. The Sunday morning is nice and chilled for me. I will plan my week out, my diary out. I have my non-negotiables, my morning routine, my lunch, and my evening. But then everything else fits around that. So when I see my clients, when I want to go work out, when I want to have meetings, you slot it in there and you have your non-negotiable times. These are my times for emails at the beginning of the day and the end of the day. I don't check my emails during the middle of the day. I rarely do unless it's a quiet day. I set time deciding which to do things, and then I let people know I am contactable within these hours, and that's that. And I find if you work in an office environment, that's really important. Otherwise, you're just going to be going back and forth, and you don't really get much done. You think you've done a lot, but realistically, you're just like, I've just been going back and forth,
Is it not raining?
which is a bit of a nightmare. And then every evening, if you want, then you can kind of tailor your day. Like, okay, well, I know tomorrow, actually, I'm going to have a meeting during this work period. Let me just change that. So you kind of have more of a flex. You have your structure, then you have your flexibility within the structure, which I find for people with ADHD is paramount to keep us engaged. If it's just 9 to 5, square box, we're going to lose our minds after about 3 months. We're going to be like, I want to quit and I'm going to shoot someone. I'm not, but I have the thoughts of it, Let's not do that. And then whilst you do your work, so I usually set 2 hours as my slot times, and I use something called the Pomodoro technique. For me, I find for people with ADHD, it is one of the most effective ways of actually doing work. So for people who don't know about it, it's basically 25 minutes of pure work, 5-minute break. You do that for 4 cycles, and then you take an hour-long break. That, for me, with people with ADHD is brilliant. Because there'll be moments where your hyperfocus sort of wanes, and then you just, okay, let me breathe, let me recharge myself, and then I can dive back in.
Are you wanting John and Steve
and then you set your task within these 25 minutes to keep yourself engaged. And I find that works really, really well.
Brilliant. Talking about creating routines and planning, we know that creating routines for everything can be a bit overwhelming, especially for a kid with ADHD. What are the top 3 routines that you recommend, and how should we introduce them to kids?
I say again, same thing, like morning and evening routine. Foundations is the most important thing, but create it with your kid, like create it with your child. Don't just be like, this is what we're doing, and the kid's like, well, I don't want to do that, and they're not going to do it. I don't care how much you're going to try, you're going to get a lot of resistance, maybe some kicking, some screaming, some crying, and that's just not a good way to kind of start anything. So create it with them as to give them a few options, like 2 options max. You want to do A, do you want to do B? Okay, cool. A, B, next. You want to do A, B, next. But you're already in charge of it. You're just giving them options, and you're getting them to kind of co-create it. I find that also gives a lot of accountability and responsibility for the child, because then when they, let's say, they may not want to be doing so, if you can kind of bring it back to, well, we did create it together. And it does make a massive, massive difference. And then I think the third thing is exercise. Have them exercise on a daily basis, running around, kicking your ball. Have them do, if they're at school, let them run around as much as they can until they're tired. Like, knacker them out, so by the time they're at home, it's a lot easier and a lot more calm. I'm not going to say it's going to be perfectly calm, because there are days it's also like a zoo, but it's about managing the animals within the zoo. So if you can get them to do daily activities and exercise, that's going to massively help as well. If you can get them into clubs at school, after school, certain parents who love playing sports, take them to sports play with you. If you like playing tennis, if you're playing golf, football, whatever it is, get them to come with you and put them in the children's section or play with them, and just physically get them tired. And then you'll also find that it's also just going to create more time for you with your child, and you have more bonding moments. And then that creates more of an aspect of, oh, yes, I look forward to this. I get to spend time with mum or dad doing an activity. And for men, like, we bond very differently than, let's say, with women. So if you have mostly boys, you're going to be bonding through something called vasopressin, which is essentially men bond through doing activities together. So doing something with your kid, with your boys, will bond that child to you, because they're like, oh, this is something I get to bond with. So that's something for to keep in the back of your mind.
Brilliant. Kids with ADHD often have trouble sticking to routines. So even if parents set up the best possible routines, things won't always go, as planned or perfectly. How should parents handle the days when their kids just aren't following these routines?
Just go with it. Just don't try to fight it. The tide is going left, and you're trying to drag them right. You're trying to drag a grizzly bear who's hungry, and they're not going to be dragged. They're going to drag you their way. So what I say is, let them be kids. Everyone's going to have low executive function days, especially children with ADHD, and it's going to be a struggle. Just accept and surrender to the process. I know it is incredibly difficult to do so if you're not used to doing that, but it makes a world of difference. You're like, okay, cool, we're going to do it this way. Today, we're going to have to be doing it this way. Don't make them feel bad for not being able to do something at that age. If they're really, really acting out, then I am kind of a fan of old school parenting, of you give them a bit of a rollicking. That's when if they're really, really misbehaving, check them. But if it's just they just don't feel like doing something, go with the flow, center yourself. And I've given this advice to many of my clients who have children. I'm like, go lock yourself in the bathroom for 5 minutes. Do your breath work, listen to your music, bring yourself back to present, understand that, okay, this is what I'm going to have to do in order to work with this, and then come back out. Hopefully you have noise cancelling headphones, so even if the kids are banging on the door, Mommy, Daddy, come out, you can still, not hear them. And then when you come out, you're regulated, your nervous system's like, cool, I can handle this. Let's move forwards. And also what I would say is, in these moments, treat them like an adult. Don't treat them like a kid. Ask them in the way that, how would you want it pointed out to you if you were in their shoes? And it's usually with kindness and compassion, not with being aggressive and being mean and being shouty. It's like, okay, well, if I was in their position, how would I want to be cajoled into doing the thing? You know what? Yeah, I'd want to be treated nicely and with respect, essentially like a mini adult. And it gives them a sense of respect and power, which they're going to relish and be like, oh, okay, they love me, yes. And also there's a sense of respect, which builds.
And be calm with it.
Yeah, exactly.
I've noticed people talking more about ADHD systems these days. So the idea is that, let's say, if their routine is to clean their room, the system would be to put things away right after using them. So what systems would you suggest for keeping these kids organized?
I mean, I love that kind of, if you do something, if you can play with something, put it away, clean it away. Like I do that with myself. So if I'm going to the gym, I'm like, cool, put stuff in bag goes back, clean. Dinner, same thing, clean immediately afterwards. Like, I don't leave it and let it fester. It's like, if I don't do it, I know I'm not going to do it for ages. So I find that helps. And I think with children, it's going to come back to a slightly more of a reward system. So having like a sticker board, having like a weekly, monthly kind of reward system. Like, okay, cool, you did this, you get a sticker for this. And then you could create the reward. So if you do this, what do you want? And kind of keeps them engaged. And you change the rewards weekly. So it's like, oh, this is a new reward. You kind of keep it up to date, especially for parents who have ADHD. It's like, okay, I get to also stay engaged as well. So that can help with that as well. But I think, yeah, something like that really works quite well. And if they're going to, take off their shoes and change clothes, you do it immediately afterwards. Just straight for me, it's in that moment because you're already there, and it's so much easier to do it when you're there. If suddenly you leave and then you come back, like, oh god, I'm looking at it, I'm like, I don't want to do that. I know the kids are like, I'm definitely not doing it now. So those moments of getting it done immediately works really well, and then giving them a slight reward, stars or points, however you want to do it, will work really well.
Yeah, a lot of experts, a lot of you experts were really mentioning rewards because this is really the way to go. Maybe an example of a really good one or a really bad one. What should we not use?
I mean, try not to give them sugar, because you're going to send your kid into absolute hyper drive triple Duracell bunny mode, and then you can be like, oh my god, I've created a monster. And like, yes, you have. This is your fault. This is no one else's fault. You chose a bad reward. Yeah. So reward. If you're going to do rewards in terms of food, make it healthy food. So, if you want to do, so let's say sugar, use sugar alternatives. So like dates, fruits. You can give them dark chocolate, which is slightly bitter. Honey, things like that work quite well. It could be toast with honey, just something which isn't going to be pure, sugar, which lights up the brain completely differently than anything else. It could also be a trip somewhere, or you want new shoes, or you wanted that football or that toy or whatever. After a certain amount of time, you can earn that reward because you've earned it, and it kind of teaches the kids, okay, well, I have to work for things, and it's also great for later on in life, as opposed to, oh yes, if I just ask for it, or if I just scream and kick and shout, it creates entitlement. I'm just going to act like a brat and I'll get it, which is something I'm very, very adamant against. So I think doing it that way works quite well as well.
Brilliant, thank you. Given that some people either downplay ADHD or use it to excuse sometimes, their behavior, what tips do you have for parents dealing with kids who sometimes use ADHD as a reason for their bad habits?
I just tell them, and I do this with a lot of my clients, and I've also done it with my little brother, my little sister. I'm like, yeah, but your ADHD is not an excuse for bad behavior. And I put them in, I kind of, change position of shoes. I'm like, okay, well, if, you did X, let's say if Molly did X to you, would you like it? No. So why are you doing it if you don't want someone to do it to yourself? So that kind of aspect of you frame it in a way which they can understand. And like, oh, you know what? That was actually mean, or no, that's not right. It's like, okay, cool, I get it. Because also with ADHD, you have a sense of justice. So you're like, you know what? That's right. That wasn't that's not just. So I won't do that instead. So that definitely puts the onus on them to realize their own behaviors. And then, as I said, sometimes you just need to tell them off. You need to give them a rollicking if they've been really, really bad. You just need to be, this is not acceptable. And I think that plays a massive role of, yeah, you know what? It's the same thing at work. If you've messed up and you've really done something bad, you deserve to be told off. And it's an essence of learning humility from a young age of, you know what, I can't have it all my own way. It's a good way of life. And I know plenty of, let's say, I've been in touch with a fair few tribes, either from South America or from Africa, and they do the same thing. They're like, hey, if you misbehave, we're going to tell you off because it's not right. And it's that aspect of, and then the child will learn very, very quickly what is right and what is not right. And then it kind of makes them a much better, more well-rounded human being later on.
True. Well, since the corporate world wasn't the best fit for you, or not entirely, anyways, what advice do you have for parents who want to prepare their kids for the work environment as we know it?
I honestly, what I would say is like, just be real with them. But also ask yourself, is this what you want for them, or is this what they want for themselves? Are you making the child live vicariously through you? Does the kid really want to become a lawyer, a doctor, an engineer, a banker? or do they want to do something else? That's lesson number one, and that's on the parents of, you need to take a step back. Because that happened to me. That's why I went to the corporate world, because it's kind of what was imposed upon me. I would have probably have done psychology at university if it wasn't for certain conversations I had with my father, who was working in banking. And then, so that's really important, because when you have that reflection, you reduce the opportunity for the children becoming resentful of you. Like, oh, I'm only doing this for you, Dad, or for you, Mum. So that also probably means they will need less therapy later on in life, which is great. But I would also be very real with them and prep them for what the corporate world is actually like. Like, this is what it's going to, if you work in the corporate world, just tell your kid, this is the way it is. Like, be very black and white. Don't paint it as, oh, this is going to be amazing. I'm like, corporate world is pretty brutal. It doesn't particularly cater to people with any form of neurodivergence. There is very slowly becoming, there's education around it coming out. But a lot of companies also just like tick boxing it. Like, yes, cool, we've done it. And then they don't implement a lot of stuff. So it's one of those where you're going to need to prep your kid if that's what they want to do. Okay, well, this is how they communicate. This is what they're going to expect of you. These are the actions you'll need to do. These are the things you'll need to be thinking about and to be prepping for. So I'd say really that's what they want, prep them for it. If it's like any athlete will prep for a game or prep for an event, a lawyer is going to prep for a case. Prep your child as best as you can, and then they have to figure it out for themselves. And then for the kids, I would say is, if that's what you want, try to look for a company who's also neurodivergent inclusive. Don't work for a company that doesn't care about you, will replace you any day. Work for a company that's going to be like, okay, cool, this is the things we will provide for you as a neurodivergent. This is how we actually enable you to get the best out of you and all this type of stuff. That's what I would look for if I was going to be looking to reapply in the corporate world. That's what I'd be looking for.
Yeah, definitely. Things are changing for the better.
Yeah,
so yeah, there's hope. Okay, let's move now to the rapid fire questions. What's your best parenting advice in less than 60 seconds?
Quite simply, it's just one line: co-create and learn to understand your child. That's what it is. That's all you need. Co-create with them, get them involved, give them responsibility, and learn to understand your child. Every child is going to be different. Your son from your daughter from whatever. Learn to understand your kid, what makes him tick, and then the world will be much easier for you.
Why do you think this summit is a must attend for parents of kids with ADHD?
Simply because it's going to provide you with all the information that you need to become a better ADHD parent. Like, what else do you really need? If it's going to make you a better parent for your kid with ADHD, that's why you should be joining this summit for sure.
Brilliant. What's the lesser known food that is good for ADHD that could surprise parents maybe?
I wouldn't say it's so lesser known, but I think eggs are crucial. Eggs are crucial because they're full of choline, and we need choline for our brain to function correctly. It converts into acetylcholine, which has an abundance of effects, but it has a primary effect on brain function and also helping to regulate our nervous system.
Would never have guessed that. What's the ultimate instant Zen trick for ADHD?
For me personally, so I'll go breathwork and music combined together, because in the space of a minute or two, you can reset your system. You play music, you can't focus on your breath, you let things melt away, and then it's very much like, okay, now I feel calm. Now I can actually get back to what I was doing before. For me, it's king.
It's a game changer. And what's the most interesting ADHD behavior that made you smile?
There are so many, to be honest, but I would say, I guess my ability to find wonder in all things, especially when I take a moment to be still, that for me is beautiful, and it's always going to make me smile. It brings me to presence, to connection, and it just makes me happy, and therefore I can't stop smiling.
Gorgeous. Alex, I'd like to thank you for this incredible insights that you have shared with us. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to join us, and I'm excited on future projects with you. Thank you so much.
It's been my absolute pleasure, Stella. Thank you very much for having me.